Listen, my name's Josh Billhorn, and I work with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. It's my joy to be with you guys tonight. Is that, mind if I move to the center? Is that all right? All right. So, can be closer to all you guys over here. All right. Cool. Well, yeah, I work with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. I'm on staff at InterVarsity. We're going to be talking about money tonight, which I hadn't seen that video yet. That's a pretty powerful video, isn't it? I'm actually still thinking about that. But just to share with you a little bit about myself, I have been on staff with InterVarsity for 12 years. I've gotten to know, I've been on staff for 12 years, but this is the first time I've actually spoken at Platteville. I've spoken at a whole bunch of InterVarsity chapters, but was excited to be invited to come over. I've gotten to know a few of you guys I direct InterVarsity's Leadership Institute. It's our month-long leadership training program, and it's good to see some familiar faces here. How many of you guys were at cross training this last month? Yeah, I directed the Joshua track, and about like 90% of my track was from Platteville. Took a look at my roster. It said Platteville, River Falls, Platteville, Carroll. You know, that was hilarious. But I had a blast with you guys. I've got to know one of your colleagues. How many of you guys know Casey Ellers? Casey? I love that guy. I hired him to work on staff. He's at Beloit College, and he lives about 5 minutes from my house now. Actually, that's where he grew up, 5 minutes from my house. And I've got to know Casey quite a bit, helping him get to know Beloit. And I love his heart. He has a heart for evangelism, a heart for witnessing communities. And I can tell, your guys' reputation precedes you. That's one of the reasons why I was excited to be here. You guys you should know, you are known for your commitment to the gospel. You are known for your commitment to community. And it's my joy to be able to be with you guys here. For those of you who are here, that's a word I want to have before I get going too much. For those of you who are really committed to that vision of witnessing community, I want to bless you and just keep on pressing on with that. It's a vision that's worth committing your life to, not just during your college years. But for those of you who are here and kind of checking out InterVarsity for the first time this semester or even the first time tonight, this is a community that, even though this is my first time present with you guys, for what I know of this community, if this is your first time here, this is a community that's going to love you. This is a group of people that's going to care for you, and they're going to invest in you. My role with InterVarsity, I serve as the Associate Director for the Lakes and Plains region. InterVarsity's got about 35 to 40,000 students involved in it, and we kind of break ourselves up by regions across the country. And I get to work with Wisconsin, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, so I travel around a little bit. And it's my joy and my job to train staff teams, to work with staff, to serve students. So that's what I do. I live in Milton, Wisconsin, which is near Janesville. You guys know where Janesville, Milton is at? I've got a family. I'll show a picture of my family here real quick. That's my family. That's my lovely wife Opala, Opal with an A on the end. She teaches classical voice and piano lessons. And my two little kids, David and Ellie. David is 3. He's my hero. He calls himself the hero. He says, "Daddy, me a hero. Me protect mommy. Me protect Ellie." David is got a little brave heart. I read from the stories of David from the Bible about David, fighting the lions and bears, and so he wants to fight lions and bears. I have to tell him that can be a little dangerous when you get older, kid. And this morning he created. I'm going to be gone for a couple days here, so he and I spent some extra time this morning. He likes to invent games, and he invented a game called Hide and Wrestle. So, I hide. He finds me, and then we wrestle. And then, okay, Daddy, you hide again. We hide, and then we have to wrestle. He loves to wrestle. And wrestling was once a big part of my life, so I love that. Hide and wrestle. And my 1.5-year-old, Ellie, is it possible? I didn't think it was possible for 18-month-olds to be neat freaks, but she's a neat freak. She's the delight. David's my hero. She's the delight of my heart. And she, picks up after her brother. I told David, you can't get used to this, because she puts his toys away. I mean, David, he's still in diapers, right? So I change his diaper, and she takes the diaper and throws it away for me. That's the kind of sister she is. So I told David, you've got it made, buddy, but don't get used to it. I talk about my family because as much as I'm involved in ministry, my family is a big part of my ministry as well. So That's my family. Tonight we're talking about money, and when Hannah sent me an email asking me if I could speak on this topic, her first, I'm going to make fun of you a little bit here, Hannah. First she said, Josh, we want you to speak on money, and that was it. Well, you can take money about 15,000 different directions. So I asked her to narrow it down a little bit. And Joel, what's his last name? Yeah, I think he had the. Joel, you here tonight? Yeah, okay. Joel had Hannah went back to some students and said, hey, how should Josh focus in on this? And Joel had the suggestion, how about you just bring money for all of us? I love you guys, but I can't do that. I just, after some prayer and some thinking about it, and some helpful stuff from Hannah, we're going to focus on faithful stewardship. I'm a linear sort of guy, so I like to know where we're going, and some of you might like that. You might like roadmaps. So this is where we're headed tonight. Behind me, we're going to talk about the principles of stewardship, faithful stewardship, concentrating on Matthew 25, 14 through 30. I'm going to speak a lot tonight through that passage. But also we're going to get a little practical, talking about the principles of giving and some practical tips. So before we start, I'm going to pray, as much as for me as for all of us. So let's pray together. Father in heaven, I thank you for UW Platteville. I thank you for the ways you've been working through this chapter for decades. But not just through this chapter, you've been working in individual hearts this semester. So as I take a look at about 100 and so students here, I thank you for the 100 or so lives that you've been touching, the ways you've been working. And tonight, I pray that you would, even though I know we're tired and we have some miles on us from this semester, and the end is in sight, and our minds are probably on those projects and those papers or whatever has to get done. Father, tonight, would you please just help us to pause and to listen to your word? Holy Spirit, please speak through your word into our hearts, into my heart as much as anybody tonight, even as I speak. In your good name, amen. Well, do you guys have Bibles with you? If you don't, I'm going to have the text up here in just a minute. We're going to speak on, if you do, you can open up to Matthew 25, verse 14. I want to put the text up there in just a minute. Before I do that, I want to talk about the context of this passage. This is the passage, this Matthew 25, starting at verse 14 or so. It's often called the parable of the talents. Okay, it's a well-known. If you maybe you're like, what's a talent, right? So some of us, we've never heard of that before. Others of us, it's kind of a passage that some people have heard before. It's well known to some, and pastors tend to speak on it a lot. I think it's got a lot of interpretations that sometimes limit the impact of the passage. But before we read the text, I want to share some more insight to help us, I think, really, so we can apply it well tonight. This is the fourth parable, and parable are stories. So Jesus is talking, and this is the fourth story in a row he's talking about a row that has the same theme. All the parables up to this point are all talking about the end times, talking about Jesus, about when the time we have now is going to come to an end, and he's going to return, and talking about being ready for his return. All right, he's actually told the disciples already that he's going to go back to heaven, but he's going to come back someday. And when he comes back, it will be the end of times. And every single one of these parables he's talking about is like how we need to be vigilant, how we need to be ready for the return of the King. And we need to read this passage in light of that. Do you remember the movie, The Return of the King from Lord of the Rings? Any Lord of the Rings fans out there? I thought there might be a couple. I know it's been a few years since the movies came out, but they ring true. I love the movies. Yeah, they're cool action flicks, no doubt, and the computer, animation was incredible. But the story of the Lord of the Rings, I've read the book. I have to admit, I'm kind of a geek. I've read the book like 4 or 5 times. All right. Yeah, that's somebody like, okay, this guy's a real geek. The story is awesome. There's powerful images there and powerful characters, and The Return of the King is perhaps one of my favorite of all 3 of the stories. And in that you've got the people of Numenor, right? This race of men, right? They're the greatest of the humans of Middle Earth, right? They once had a line of great kings, okay? And there came a time when that line of kings died out, and then so the people were governed by stewards until a king would rise up, until a king of the line of Isildur would come. And so what you have this great history of these great kings. And then all of a sudden, stewards take over. And at first, the stewards did a great job But after time, the stewards became they became more and more wicked. And what happened to these people lost more and more hope. And I think for us it's kind of like that. Jesus has been gone for a while. These parables are important because Jesus has been gone for a long time. But the fact is, our King is coming back. There is going to be a return of the King, and we need to be ready. And again, these parable of the talents need to be read in light of the fact that, hey, Jesus is coming back. Let's read the text together, and I'm just going to read it up here. Again, it will be like this is Jesus. He's leaving one parable, going right into this one. Again, that means the end times. Again, the end times will be like a man going on a journey who has called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one who had 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of the servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, you have entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come share in your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you've entrusted me with 2 bags. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. The man who received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, You wicked and lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I return I could have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. But throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's a text I want to focus on tonight. From the text here, I want to talk about 5 principles of stewardship. All right? 5 principles of stewardship. To steward means to take care of something. The first principle, what you steward, each of these 3 servants were called to steward what was given to them. First of all, is what you steward is not yours. First principle, what you steward is not yours. The servants were asked to steward something that was not theirs. It wasn't their money, but they were responsible for it. I think we can apply this passage today. You know, the passage I put up here used bags of gold, and a lot of translations it's called talents. And a talent was a large sum of money. Okay, one talent, or it talked about a bag of gold, but 1 talent of gold could, depending on the commentators, it could have been worth as much as 20 years' wages. Okay, so this just a little bit of the story here. This master goes out on a trip, and he entrusts his servants to take care of his money. And 1 talent equals, again, as much as 20 years' wages. In today's income, today's standards, if you make about $50,000 a year, that's close to, $1 million for each talent. Okay. These stewards, these servants, were asked to take care of something that wasn't theirs. And I think as we apply it, those bags of gold, those talents, they can apply to a lot of things other than just money. Take a look back at Genesis, the creation of man. God created Adam and Eve, and he gave them this garden to take care of. All right, and there was work. This is before the fall. This is before sin entered to the world. And he said, I'm giving you this garden. It's not yours, but I want you to take care of it. I want you to steward it. And it wasn't theirs, but they had to take care of it. I think it behooves us as we sit here tonight. What has God entrusted me to take care of? What has He given me? What am I to steward? There's a lot, and you think about it, you've been entrusted with much. Each and every one of you. I don't know you, and I know some of you, but each and every one of you tonight, you've been given a lot to steward. First and foremost, you've been given the gospel of the good news of the knowledge of who Jesus is. As the Apostle Paul often writes, We've been entrusted with the gospel. And if you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and King, and you know the good news of the kingdom of God, then I'm sorry, but if you're a follower of Christ, then you're an ambassador of Christ. It doesn't matter. If you're a follower of Christ, you are an ambassador. And it's up to you to see what kind of ambassador you're going to be, whether good or one who kind of skirts their responsibilities. Take a look at 2 Corinthians 5. And it's not to be a burden, but it's supposed to be a joy. Paul says, and I love how he says this in 2 Corinthians 5, I'm compelled by the love of Christ. I love the testimony here tonight. I'm compelled by the love of Christ because I want to share Jesus. So the gospel is one thing we to steward. And the other is giftings. If you think to yourself, I don't have any gifts, all of you here are gifted people, right? You all have something you can offer to your King. But if you are somebody who says here tonight, I really don't know what I have to offer Jesus. Well, then I'm saying you're in dire need of your community around you to say, hey, you know what? You're good at fill in the blank. The power of having a good community around you, a good witnessing community, there's lots of things, but one thing is that a powerful thing is you can actually tell each other, hey, this is what you're good at. Sometimes we're kind of down on ourselves. We need people around us to say, hey, Josh, did you ever realize you're actually good at fill in the blank? And this is something I think you can actually steward well. What else have you guys been entrusted with? Barring failing out of school, and I know it's finals time, and some of you might be nervous about that. Barring failing out of school, you're all going to have a college education to steward. All right, you all are going to have an education. And did you know, from a world perspective, less than 1% of the world receives a 4-year college education from a university. Less than 1% of the world. And with that knowledge comes a lot of ability to do a lot of good things. That's something that you can steward. And with education often comes money. So let's talk about money, all right? With education comes money. I know we live in uncertain times, in our economy these days. I've been reading more and more scary things, but I do know that even though it used to be that if you had a 4-year education, you were assured a good job with a good pay, and that's not always the case these days. But you're still better positioned than most to be able to have an income, a good income, by the world standards, a phenomenal income. And like the servants of the parable, and you've got to steward that. And this is hard. When you think of, we see referred to as, how much money do you have? Even our language, how much money do you have? This is my money. And we got to remember, as the parable, what you steward is not yours. Our money doesn't belong to us. Plain and simple, it doesn't belong to us. Just like our gifts don't belong to us. They're entrusted to us to take care of until the King returns. But it's so hard. The Billy Graham, many of you guys probably know that name, he often said that money, he has a saying, money is a representation of our hard work, and that's why it's hard to get rid of. You guys work hard for your money. You work hard for the income that you receive, so it's hard to think of it as not yours. But we have to remember, just as Adam and Eve, they were given the garden. It wasn't theirs, but it was theirs to take care of. And we're to use everything we have to glorify Him. So what does that actually mean practically? Does it mean we're supposed to give away all of our income? Some people have said that, okay, every penny I make, I'm going to give away. Well, it's not very practical. You still have to live, and you still have to, have a car to get to places. And if you have kids who wear diapers, you've got to put diapers on them, right? So not necessarily. Does it mean that we shouldn't spend any money on ourselves at all for any kind of trivial things? Not necessarily. But we should not use the world's standards of what a comfortable life looks like to be our standard. Let me say that again. We should not use the world's standards of what a comfortable world looks like to be our standard of comfort. We are to take care of our families and provide for our needs. And if the Lord provides you someday with a spouse and children, and some of you might be married already, I don't know, but most of you probably are not, you're going to have the responsibility to provide for that family. So you should provide for them. And I do think it's okay for us to enjoy things once in a while, right? I do think it's okay for us to enjoy things. We see a God in the Scriptures who enjoys and giving things to us. We have a giving God who is given to us. We have a God who delights in us. But we need to do so. And I delight in giving to my children and providing for my family. But we need to do so within reason. I think when we fully grasp that what we steward is not our own, our priorities change in how we spend it. I've greatly admired those who've chosen to live I've got friends. I've got a good buddy of mine. Okay, his name's Jason, and in high school. We were both on the wrestling team together. We were both captains of our team, and Jason went on to become a very wealthy man. All right, And the guy has made millions of dollars over a short period of time in his life. And he became, as we've talked about that, he said, Josh, how much does an average person our age make? All right. And we came up with a number, and he says, okay, I'm going to live at this, and the rest I'm going to try to give away. And so even though he's made lots and gobs of money, he and his wife live in a very simple 3-bedroom ranch, and they drive used cars, nice enough used cars, and his kids have nice clothes but not extravagant, and they look like just an average family, but yet he uses the rest of the money to advance God's kingdom. I admire people who can do that. And as Jason has told me, he and his family, there's probably some of the most joyful people that I know, actually. But they've chosen not to allow money to have power over them. It's a very freeing thing. We must be careful of the power money has over us, all right? We live in a culture where we get pretty hung up on stuff, like that video showed. How many of you ever stood in line to get a new electronic doodad, like the new iPhone that came out, all right? A few hands are going up. How many have ever eagerly waited for a new video game that just came out? All right. Oh, yeah. Some more hands go up. How many of you wish you had a more updated computer? Okay. How many of you, your laptop is on its last leg and you just kind of really want a new laptop? All right. How many of you just hate your car and wish you had a new truck or something, right? All right. Yes. I do. Stuff can have, and it can be for me too, right? I like stuff as much as the next person. You know what? I'm into hunting. I like to hunt. I went deer hunting this last week, and it was awesome. I only shot a doe, but that was okay. But for me, I would really love a new X-Bolt Browning, right, with a synthetic stock. That would be awesome. And I go to the Cabela's website and I start to drool, and I got to go away from Cabela's. Cabela's to me is a bad thing because I start to be envious over stuff. iPhones and Browning X-Bolts, they're not bad things, okay? They're good things. But we have to remember our money's not our own. We're stewarding it for the King. All right. Second principle is stewardship starts now. Did you notice in that passage that those first 2 servants, they started right away? They didn't wait. They started right away. I think the gospel writer, the word right away actually means like instantly. Like they didn't start the next day. The moment the master left, they went and put their money to work. And the verb to work doesn't mean they went and put it into a bank. They actually created businesses, and they actually created an industry for that money to produce more money. They did it right away. Friends, my observation is all too often in college, students wait. They think that their stewardship of the resources start after college in the real world. We kind of have the idea, I don't have any money, and in a lot of ways you don't. We realize, okay, I'm going to really become a good steward after college when I have a real-world job making real-world money. I'm going to suggest to you gently that's not a real healthy way to go about thinking about things, all right? Even if you just make $50 a week at your part-time job, right? Steward that money. Give of that money and think about, okay, Lord, how can I use this to best glorify you? If you don't start now, even when you have a little, what's to say that you're going to be faithful with more later? There's a principle given here as we take a look at the rewards. We'll talk about those in a minute. Even when you're given a little, you're going to be the Lord will reward you with more later to steward. And now but it's not only with money, it's also with the gospel. I really think there's a correlation. He had the testimony about sharing the gospel. There's a correlation with money and sharing the Jesus. These are some new thoughts I have, and I don't have them quite thought out yet, but money and the gospel are both things that are entrusted to us that aren't ours, but they're both things that the Lord commands us to give freely to others. And there's sometimes we have a heart where there's a hang-up, there's a roadblock where we don't want to give our money away. We don't want to use it. We don't want to let go of it. And we want to keep it in. As well as this good news about Jesus. We don't want to keep this in. But I think sometimes as I've taken a look at my own life and those other guys I've discipled, when there's a breakthrough and we can easily give away our gifts and our money, we can also start more easily giving away the gospel. There's something when we start to realize these things aren't ours, but when we start right away, when we start faithful with what little we have, and we start right away, we become more and more faithful as time goes on. The third principle is rejoice in what you've been given and don't waste time looking at other people's gifts. As I take a look at this passage, there's one hero that really arises for me. You know who it is? Person was given 2 talents or 2 bags of gold. Okay, why that person, right? He's stuck in the middle. He's the real hero, all right, as my son would say these days. I think he's actually one of the, as I've been thinking about it, he's probably one of the more impressive people in Scripture. As I've read through Scripture lately, he just jumps out at me as so impressive, and that's a big statement. But here's a guy who's stuck in between the guy with 5 and guy with 1. All right, and he could have said, hey, like he saw his friend just, his fellow servant got 5 bags, and he only got 2. He did not. Does this guy waste time saying, "Hey, master, don't you trust me? Don't you trust me with 5 bags? Why'd you only give me 2? I've got just as much skill as this guy has." He doesn't waste time trying to compare himself to the guy who had 5 bags. He doesn't waste time, trying to prove himself that he was even more worthy than the guy with 5. What does he do? He dutifully goes to work and with what he's been given, what he's been entrusted with. And his results aren't as impressive as the guy who had 5. But he still joyfully utilizes what the master's given him. And we also see that he receives the same reward. Folks, those of us in college are often high achievers, okay? I'm looking at outperforming. You're in college because you're a high achiever of some kind, okay? And I know as I'm looking out at you here, there's probably quite a few high achievers among you. I work and supervise university staff, and they are a bunch of high achiever types, okay? I like hiring high achievers, but high achievers have an Achilles heel, okay? You guys have an Achilles heel. If you're one of those people who likes to be a high achiever, the Achilles heel is the person who's better than you, all right? And the person who's better than you, when you actually find someone who's actually better or who's more gifted than you are. And I was one of these people at one point in time in my life. I was made nervous when I was pretty good. I was a very good student in high school through college. First job I had outside of college, I worked for a business consulting firm, and it was a pretty prestigious job, and I thought I was kind of that guy, and I realized I was surrounded by people who were a heck of a lot smarter and better than I was, and it was really it kind of shattered me inside a little bit because my foundation was built on something it shouldn't have been. But that's why I love the faithfulness of this guy. He realizes what he's been given, and it's not as much as somebody else, but he's faithful with it anyway. In terms of money, as I look out before me here, so there's some of you in this room who are going to make millions of dollars over the course of your lifetime, all right? And there's some of you as I look out before you, there's some of you here who are going to make far less than what you think you're going to make over the course of your lifetime, all right? Some of you are planning to make lots of money. Some of you are planning not to make lots of money, okay? But there's some of you here who are thinking you're going to end up making far less than what you think, okay? I'm just kind of playing the odds a little bit, but that will happen. That will happen. How are you going to respond to that? Now, those of you here who will make millions of dollars over the course of your lifetime, you're going to be like the person who was given 5 talents. I encourage you, make that person 5 talents, make that your person your model. He doesn't brag. He doesn't say, hey, look how much the master entrusted to me. He must think I'm all that. No, he humbly and dutifully puts his stuff to work. And if you receive less in your life over the course of your life, monetarily wise or otherwise, less than you thought you were going to get, be just as diligent putting it to work. Yeah, you're probably going to have enough to provide for your family, but you might have to sacrifice a bit more for things. But don't waste time being envious. I have met too many people. I'm in my mid-30s, right? And I have colleagues, friends of mine who I graduated from high school with, who are still bemoaning the fact they're not making enough money. But now they're not being grateful and putting to work what little they've been given. Fourthly, stewardship brings both rewards and accountability. We see here that there is reward for good stewardship, both in this world and in the world to come. Being faithful with the resources and gifts that God gives us is going to yield us the commendation of our King and Master. And Paul teaches us this in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, that we're all going to stand before the Master someday. And for those of us who know Jesus Christ and trust him, we're going to be saved. But the entire New Testament rings true with that we're saved by faith alone. Faith in Jesus Christ. We're not saved by the works that we do. But there will be an accounting. So we're saved. We're going to go to heaven. If we know Jesus Christ, we're saved by our faith in him. We're not saved by our works. But there will be an accounting for how we lived our lives. And first, Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians. And Matthew's parables give great support to this. For some of us, it's going to be a day of embarrassment. I know this is kind of a hard thing to hear, but it will be a day of embarrassment because we're going to realize that we weren't necessarily good stewards with what we've been given. For others, it's going to be a time where we can rejoice because we can rejoice because we realize we were good stewards with what we were given. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to be embarrassed for all of eternity. From what we know of heaven, it indicates there will be joy for all. But we do know that when we stand before the Lord, but we do know there will be this accounting when we stand before the Lord. And Lord, friends, for one, when I stand before the Lord, I want to hold my head up high, and I want to have my heart unashamed. I know full well that I don't need to earn my King's love. With my children, every night we call Jesus the King. I say, David, who's your King? Jesus. Who's your King? And what does your King do? He loves me. Your King loves you, but we also need to be good stewards and faithful, and there will be accounting someday. And this was the case for the first two stewards. And what was the reward? Joy. I love this. Joy and sharing in their master's happiness. What would that day be like when we stand before the Lord? We can actually look at him face to face and share in his joy, share in his happiness. I look forward to that day. This was the case for the first two servants. The third servant, however, the master treats this guy. How the master treats this guy, well, the first two servants received the reward. That is not so the case with the third servant. How the master treated the third servant, I confess to you, has actually brought some grief to me over different points in my life. I've actually had trouble with how he got treated. And maybe some of you are feeling the same way as well. Here's the guy who had only one talent, one bag of gold. That's a lot of money. He didn't want to lose it, so he just made sure it was safe upon his master's return. So what's so wrong with that, right? So you have asking that question, what's so wrong with just keeping it safe for the master? At first glance, it might be looked like the master's kind of hard. But as I've reflected upon this more and studied it more, I realize the master's being incredibly fair with the servant. What the servant does really insults the master. The master put him in charge of much. And what the servant does is basically treats what the master gave him with great disdain, or disinterest at best and disdain at worst. His lack of action by itself really mocks the trust that his master put in him. He makes things even worse when he opens his mouth to try to defend himself. All right? When he opens his mouth to try to defend himself, things go from bad to worse. What he really is doing, he's really mocking the master to his face. The way it comes across in English, it's kind of hard, more difficult to understand. But he's really telling him, "Hey, I know you're a person who's hard, and you sow where you reap where you don't sow," and that's an insult to him. And friends, only a wicked servant will excuse himself and blame the master. There is grace, but grace does not condone irresponsibility. Now we see there's a punishment. There is punishment for this wicked servant. He's thrown out. Now some of you thrown out with this weeping and gnashing of teeth. Some of us might take that to read, well, does that mean we can lose our salvation when we don't steward things well? That would be stretching the parable too far. I think a better passage is this passage from 1 Corinthians. I want to read that for you real quick. By the grace that God has given me, this is Paul talking about this. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one of us should build with care. For no one can lay a foundation other than the one already laid, which is in Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hair, stubble, the work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it's burned up, the builder will suffer a loss, but yet will be saved, even though as one escaping through flames. What's Paul saying here, and what the parable that Jesus is saying is getting at, is that we can build upon. God's given us much, and we can build upon it. If we waste it, we still will be saved, but we'll be escaping through the flames. And friends, as I said before, I want to be one on the final day to be able to stand before the Lord and say, I want to hear those words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Finally, the last principle here is faithfulness for the long haul. We see that these stewards the master is gone for a long time, probably years. And the master's most likely, it was actually a good chunk of the life of the servants. Now, how did they remain faithful over such a long haul? And how can we remain faithful over such a long haul, being good stewards? But the text really doesn't share how specifically, but let me offer a few ideas. Number one, so how can we remain good stewards over the long haul? One is our community. Again, I come back to this. And there's a reason why I believe I believe so strongly in the missional community model. We help each other to remain faithful over the long haul. The second is worship. Worship is we could talk about worship all night, but worship is so very important. When it comes to worship, our focus is put on Christ. As we're worshiping, as we have regular times of worship, our focus is on Christ. Our focus is not on ourselves, not on what we want. Our focus is on Christ and what he wants for us. So when you enter into worship, it should really be a time of you're worshiping him, you're ascribing goodness to him, but you're also remembering who God is and who you are and who you aren't and who he is. And remembering that he is the one in charge. And finally, I'm going to just say a word about Sabbath. Not to go all over the Sabbath, but the idea of actually setting a time aside. I'm not a legalistic. It's got to be Sunday. We can talk about that if you want, but setting aside a time regularly. Sunday is a great day to do that. That's what my family does. Setting aside time regularly to remember to focus on what God has given to you, what God is, and what you've been entrusted with. It helps us put those 6 other days of work into perspective. I love the picture in the Old Testament as the Israelites. They're wandering in the desert. They're following the Lord. They're following the Lord, the pillar of cloud, and the Lord's been their direction. He's providing food for them in manna. But every 7th day, they are supposed to stop and rest. They needed to do that because they need to remember who their provider was. Friends, we need to remember, as we could practice good Sabbath and our focus, it's one day a week where we can remember who our provider is. It can help us be good stewards over the long haul. So those are the 5 principles I want to encourage you to take out of this passage as far as being good, faithful stewards. What you steward is not yours. Stewardship starts now. Rejoice in what you've been given. Don't waste time looking for other people's gifts. And stewardship brings both rewards and accountability and faithfulness for the long haul. Just a few other things here I wanted to share. Brandon and Hannah encouraged me to share some practical things. You want to flip to the next slide here. Some principles of giving. You can throw those all up there real quick if you want. Let me encourage you, as you guys start to, even now, if you have a little bit of income, and especially as you gain more income, some good principles of giving. One, how to be a good steward of what you've been given. Giving should be systematic. Develop a pattern of how you give. Sometimes I think when we just kind of give sporadically, it's actually harder on our hearts. My wife and I, we love writing. The first checks we write every month, or the first things we do on our online banking every month, are our giving, where we're going to give to God's work and where we're going to give to God's people who are in need. And make that first check. That first check goes. Make the first payments you make. Give your first fruits to the work of God. Giving should also be in proportionate to your income. Again, that story of my buddy Jason. Some of you, the Bible talks about a tithe, which is 10%. That's in the Old Testament, but not the New. And I think 10% is a good guideline, but I don't think it should be I think we should give proportionate to our income. That means if you can give more, we should give more. Giving should also be thoughtful. Think carefully about what you give, both the amount and to whom you give. I encourage you to give to your church. I encourage you to also give to the work of the church, and giving to mission work and such. So how should you choose? One word about this. How should you choose to give to missionaries? How should you choose what missionaries to give to? My wife and I, we talked about this. There's 2 different kind of classes. We look at the people we're supporting. One, we like to support leadership in missions. Okay, there's those people who are providing leadership in mission work that, there needs to be thoughtfulness and leadership. We like to support those folks. We also like to support those people who are brand new in missions, who are having a hard time getting started, who are just young in it. So, think thoughtfully about, giving a spectrum of different kinds of work. Giving should also be given without fanfare. Matthew 6 is a great place to look at, where talking about giving without announcing it to yourself. Don't take pride in how much you give. Whether you give a lot or you give millions of dollars, whether you give a couple of dollars, take pride. Be thankful that the Lord has entrusted with what you can give. Also, giving should be cheerful. Giving with a resentful heart is never good. If that's why I encourage you to, even as my wife and I do this, but when we do our finances together, which is a good tip if you're going to be married someday.
We talk about how we give. Those are our most thoughtful. We're cheerful. We're thankful, Lord. Thank you that we can give what we can give. A couple other practical financial tips, and I'm not going to go into these in a whole lot of detail, but I talk with students a lot about actually financial stuff. So if you want to ask more questions afterwards, please feel free to ask. But two really important things: budgeting and investing. Okay, budgeting. You need I'm going to encourage you to budget even right now. If you don't have a regular income, still create a budget. www.crown.org. I think you can probably remember that. Crown Financial Ministries has great stuff. If you're a person who says, I'm just not good with money, all right? How many of you would classify yourself as, like, Josh, I need help with money, all right? Some honest people out there. That's great. And the rest, there's a lot of other hands we could go up. But this Crown Financial Ministries has got excellent resources on how to budget your money, and it started from actually I got great Bible studies on how to look at money, and I could just say go to www.crown.org and you're going to find some great stuff. But let me encourage you, live by a budget. And it's like, sometimes it feels like a straitjacket, but it gives a lot of freedom to you, because when you actually start when you actually budget in your budget, actually saving ahead for things, it can be very life-giving. And investing, a final word on that is, you need to do it, okay? Even as soon as you start getting regular, even now if you can, but as soon as you start getting regular paychecks, be systematic, be ruthless. Look at the book of Proverbs. I'll look at the book of Proverbs. It talks about preparing for the future. So I would say investing is a biblical thing to do. Where to invest and save, crown.org has some great ideas for you. But I'm going to tell you that 401ks, 403bs, Roth IRAs are all great things to do. Find a financial. If you're not good with money, find a financial. Once you actually get an income, find a financial advisor. Okay, I'm pretty good with money. I have a degree in that, but I still use a financial advisor. Even I have a financial advisor and I have an accountant, and I love writing my checks out to them as they help me manage my funds well. Yeah. Friends, as we're closed, I want to actually leave you some questions. All right, about you can throw all the questions up there. Take some of these questions, read these questions, write one or two of them down, or keep it in your mind. And as I think we're going to be spending some time worshiping now, maybe think about these. How are you tempted to see your money or resources and gifts as your own? What roadblocks are in your way? What are the roadblocks in your own heart that keep you from wanting just to give these up to God? And again, what step can you take to help you realize that it's God owns everything? What step can you What step can you take to start stewarding your resources right away? How can you start tomorrow, literally, right now, thinking, say, even tonight, as you're worshiping, Lord, what's one thing I can start tomorrow to help me stewarding my resources better? And ask the Lord to show you that even tonight. And where are you tempted to look at other people's gifts? Where do you have jealousy or even frustration with God for not gifting you with fill in the blank, whatever applies to you? What steps do you want to take to start to rejoice in your own gifts? And ask, how can your community help you? And finally, what steps do you want to take to be faithful for the long haul? All right. And so as we enter into worship, I'm going to encourage you to maybe think about one of those questions. Let me pray for you, and then I'll close. Father in heaven, we covered a lot of stuff here, but I thank you for your word. I thank you for how you speak through your word. I thank you that you've entrusted much to us. Father, I thank you for the rich gifts for us. And I pray for the folks out here and my friends. Father, I pray that you would show us what it is indeed you've gifted to us. Help us to be able to freely give what you've given us back to you and for your purposes. In your good name, amen.